There are unseen forces working behind the scenes of everyday life, some empowering, others destructive. Among them lurk manipulative spirits that seek control, influence, and domination. But understanding how they operate is the first step to disarming them. If you don't discern the trap, you walk right into it. Have you ever noticed how something invisible can control something visible? How a presence you cannot touch can shape your thoughts, your moods, even your decisions? That's not just coincidence. That's not just energy in the air. That is influence. And sometimes that influence has an agenda. A witch spirit is not what Hollywood shows you. Flying broomsticks and pointed hats. No, it's far more deceptive than that. It's subtle, strategic. It doesn't show up to scare you. It traps through suggestion, through control, through manipulation. It gains access when you ignore your discernment, when you silence your instincts, and when you surrender your authority without even realizing it. The most dangerous thing about this kind of influence is that it doesn't need your permission to enter. It just needs your attention. Once it has your focus, it can start whispering doubt, fear, guilt, confusion, until you start second-guessing your own decisions. You feel stuck, like something's blocking you. And no matter how hard you push, it feels like something keeps pushing back. That's not in your imagination. That's design. It operates in patterns of control, patterns of manipulation, patterns of intimidation. It moves through people, through words, even through systems. And if you don't identify the pattern, you'll become a part of it. So ask yourself, who's speaking into your life right now? Who's gaining influence over your emotions, your mindset, your vision? Because every spirit needs a vessel. And if you don't choose what influences you, something else will. You must understand the difference between authority and domination. True authority builds. It empowers, it strengthens. But domination, that's where a witch spirit thrives. It doesn't ask, it demands. It doesn't inspire, it controls. And that control is the first layer of the trap. But how do you identify it before it takes root? How do you recognize when the atmosphere shifts and something is trying to take over your space? You have to learn to discern the hidden agenda. Because what looks like help might actually be the hook. And that leads us directly into the next revelation, how to discern the hidden agenda of witchcraft. How do you fight what you can't see? You can't punch it, you can't outrun it, you can't even argue with it, because it doesn't speak with a voice, it speaks with a strategy. Witchcraft doesn't come with a warning label. It comes wrapped in charm, coated in influence, and cloaked in opportunity. That's how it hides, behind the mask of good intentions. The real danger isn't what's obvious. The real danger is what looks right but feels wrong. Is that uneasy silence in the room? Is that strange pressure you feel around certain people? Is the way your mind becomes cloudy, your clarity slips away, and suddenly you're doubting yourself, your value, your direction. That's how witchcraft traps you, through the agenda behind the atmosphere. It doesn't confront you with chaos, it shifts the atmosphere just enough to confuse your discernment. It plants ideas that sound helpful, but lead to helplessness. It offers advice that feels supportive, but makes you dependent. It builds a cage, not with bars, but with words, emotions, and false connections. Ask yourself, who benefits from your confusion? Who gains power when you lose confidence? That's where the agenda starts to reveal itself. Witchcraft always wants control, but it never wants to look like it's in control. It wants to pull the strings from behind the curtain so you never suspect it's even there. Sometimes it shows up as excessive flattery, sometimes it uses guilt, sometimes it sounds like wisdom, but it produces fear. When you start making decisions out of fear, you've already taken the bait. That's not guidance. That's a snare. You must learn to separate the voice from the volume. Just because something is loud doesn't mean it's leading you. And just because someone sounds confident doesn't mean their agenda is clean. Manipulation often wears the disguise of mentorship. But if it limits your growth, your independence, or your peace, it's not mentorship. It's control. Once you expose the hidden agenda, you weaken its grip. But awareness alone isn't enough. You must also recognize how it tightens that grip, what tools it uses, what signals it gives, and how it begins its takeover. So, now, we go deeper into the signs of control and intimidation, the very signals that reveal when a witch spirit is present. Control and intimidation, they don't just happen overnight. They build, slowly, quietly, and before you realize it, you're no longer making your own choices. You're reacting to fear. You're adjusting to pressure. You're shrinking to fit into someone else's design. A witch spirit doesn't need to shout to dominate. It just needs to influence your environment. It knows how to twist conversations, how to make you question yourself, how to silence your voice without ever raising its own. You start to feel like you can't breathe around certain people. You walk on eggshells. You second-guess your words. And deep inside, something tells you, this is not normal. That's how it works. Control creates confusion. Intimidation creates silence. Together, they build a system where you no longer feel safe to be yourself. It's not always physical, it's emotional. It's psychological, it's spiritual. And if you ignore the signals, you begin to tolerate what you were meant to confront. What are the signs? Pay attention to people who punish you for telling the truth. Watch how someone reacts when you set a boundary. Do they guilt you? Do they withdraw love? Do they make you feel like you're the problem for protecting your peace? That's not love. That's manipulation masquerading as care. Witch spirits thrive in spaces where fear leads and courage is suppressed. They don't want you bold. They want you obedient to their will, not your own. They don't want you to rise. They want you to depend. The moment you try to stand, you'll feel the pressure, the tension, the guilt. That's how intimidation works. It's not always a threat. Sometimes it's a silent stare. Sometimes it's that cold silence that wraps around your confidence and squeezes until you fall. When you find yourself changing your behavior just to keep someone else comfortable, that's a warning sign. When your peace has a price tag and someone else is setting it, that's not protection. That's a prison. But here's the key. Control only works where identity is weak. If you don't know who you are, someone else will define it for you. So the next step is crucial. We must expose how witchcraft builds strongholds, not just around you, but within you. A stronghold isn't just something around you, it's something built in you. And the most dangerous part, you help build it, brick by brick, without even knowing. A witch spirit doesn't always come to take control of your environment. Sometimes it seeks to hijack your mind, your thoughts, your emotions, your belief system. It begins by planting a seed, a thought, a whisper like, you're not good enough, or no one would believe you, or You'll never be free. And when you don't confront that lie, it grows. It becomes a mindset. And over time, that mindset becomes a fortress, a prison with invisible walls, where you hold the key but don't realize you're holding it. That's how emotional and mental strongholds work. They don't yell, they whisper. They don't chain your body. They paralyze your confidence. You start to believe that fear is normal, that confusion is just a part of life, that pain is just your portion. And slowly, your decisions reflect your bondage. You stop dreaming, you stop speaking, you stop pushing forward because the voice inside has convinced you that you can't. That's when the Spirit has done its job, not by overpowering you, but by convincing you to sit still, silent, small. A witch spirit builds these internal walls to keep you from accessing your true identity. Because when your identity is compromised, so is your authority. That's why it attacks the mind first. If it can trap your thoughts, it never has to fight your strength. Think about it. Have you ever talked yourself out of something you knew you were born to do? Have you ever accepted mistreatment just to keep the peace? Have you ever felt unworthy even when everything around you said you had value? That's not just emotion. That's evidence of a stronghold. But here's the good news. What was built can be torn down, and what was planted can be uprooted. You don't have to live inside a prison you didn't create. But tearing down strongholds takes more than awareness. It takes confrontation. You must face what's been buried, you must challenge what's been tolerated, and most of all, you must break the silence within. Now the question becomes, how do you break that silence and end the cycle of intimidation for good? That's where we go next. You can't break what you keep tolerating. You can't silence what you keep feeding. And you can't win a battle you're afraid to even name. Intimidation is not just a feeling. It's a tool. It's a weapon used by a witch spirit to keep you passive, quiet, and disconnected from your true power. But here's the truth. Intimidation only works when you agree with it. It needs your silence. It thrives on your hesitation. The moment you begin to speak, to push back, to take up space again, its grip weakens. Why? Because intimidation loses strength when you find your voice. Breaking the cycle begins when you stop explaining yourself to fear, when you stop apologizing for growing, when you stop shrinking to protect someone else's comfort. The longer you stay silent, the stronger the influence becomes. But when you speak up, something shifts. Not just outside, but inside of you. You may not feel strong at first. Your voice may shake. Your hands may tremble. But courage doesn't need perfection. It just needs a decision. You've got to decide. Enough is enough. You've got to say, no more manipulation, no more guilt, no more fear parading as wisdom. Take a look at your patterns. Do you withdraw every time conflict arises? Do you hide your opinions to avoid backlash? Do you feel pressure to agree just to keep things peaceful? Those are signs. Signs that the spirit of intimidation has found a foothold. And now it's time to break it. And let me tell you, breaking it won't be comfortable. It will cost you something. It might cost you approval. It might cost you relationships. It might cost you temporary peace. But the price of your freedom is always worth more than the comfort of your bondage. When you stop submitting to fear, you realign with your original design. You stop being manipulated by guilt and start being moved by clarity. And once you reclaim your voice, you begin to reclaim your territory. But freedom doesn't just happen in a moment. It must be sustained. And the question becomes, how do you maintain your authority in an atmosphere that once controlled you. That's why next, we uncover how to reclaim authority over your environment. Authority is not volume. It's not noise. It's not domination. Authority is presence. It's the power to shift the atmosphere without saying a word. When you reclaim your authority, you don't just protect your environment, you transform it. But how do you take back territory that's been occupied? You start by drawing a line, a spiritual line, an emotional line, a mental line. You decide this is where it ends. Control ends here. Manipulation ends here. Fear, guilt, confusion, they no longer get a seat at your table. Reclaiming your authority doesn't mean you become aggressive. It means you become aligned. Aligned with your identity, aligned with your voice, aligned with your assignment. Because when you know who you are, everything around you must adjust to that truth. Take inventory of your environment. Who drains your energy every time they show up? What conversations leave you feeling small, doubtful, or anxious? What places disturb your peace the moment you enter them? Those are signals. Something in that environment is challenging your authority. And here's the truth. What you allow will always continue. So if fear is dominating the space, it's because fear has been allowed to stay. If confusion clouds your mind, it's because you haven't commanded clarity to return. Authority speaks. Authority declares. Authority doesn't beg, it establishes. It sets the tone. It sets the pace. It sets the atmosphere. You don't have to control people, but you must control your space. You're responsible for the peace within it. You're responsible for the energy you entertain. You don't ask intimidation to leave, you command it. You don't negotiate with manipulation, you reject it. You don't wait for the environment to become healthy, you make it healthy by standing up and speaking what must be spoken, doing what must be done. And remember, once you reclaim your authority, don't drop it when things get uncomfortable. Authority must be maintained, not just recovered. But what makes that consistency possible? What builds the kind of inner strength that can't be shaken, even in battle? That's why next, we unlock the power of discipline in building spiritual defense. Discipline is your daily armor. It's not just about routines or rituals. It's about training your spirit to stand, even when your emotions want to collapse. Discipline doesn't wait for motivation. It moves from conviction. It's the consistent decision to guard your peace, protect your space, and walk in clarity, no matter what tries to enter. You can't win a spiritual battle with emotional habits. You can't break cycles with temporary effort. A witch spirit is relentless. And if your focus is inconsistent, it will wait for your weak moments, your tired days, your emotional lows. And that's where it tries to re-enter. Discipline keeps the door closed. It builds a system that doesn't need to be perfect, but it does need to be intentional. Discipline tells your thoughts where to go. It doesn't allow your feelings to make final decisions. It makes sure that even when you feel uncertain, your standards remain clear. Think about it. How many times have you felt strong in the moment, but lost ground the next day? That's not failure. That's a lack of defense. A strong spirit is not built in the fight. It's built before the fight, through patterns, through practices, through boundaries. Discipline is saying no to distraction. It's choosing peace when chaos wants a reaction. It's waking up with direction before the day decides who you're going to be. And the more disciplined you become, the less influence the witch spirit can ever have. Why? Because confusion can't stay where order lives. You don't need to fight every day. You need to prepare every day. So when the pressure comes, you don't flinch. When the voice of guilt whispers, you don't listen. When manipulation knocks, you don't answer. That's what discipline produces: resistance. And resistance breaks the cycle of spiritual invasion. But discipline also sharpens something deeper. It reawakens your intuition, your inner radar, your spiritual filter, that quiet voice that always knows when something's off, even before it shows its face. And that leads us into the final and perhaps most critical reality: how to sharpen your discernment so you're never deceived again. Discernment is not suspicion. It's not paranoia. It's not guessing. Discernment is clarity. It's the ability to recognize truth before the facts arrive. It's your inner compass, your unseen radar, your spiritual instinct. And in a world full of manipulation, false motives, and hidden agendas, discernment is survival. You don't discern with your eyes. You don't discern with your ears. You discern with your spirit. You can feel when something is off. You may not have proof, but your peace starts to shrink. Your energy drops. Your thoughts become cloudy. That's not a coincidence. That's your discernment trying to protect you from deception. The witch spirit doesn't just use spells. It uses strategies. It uses charm. It uses charisma. It uses imitation. It pretends to serve while secretly seeking control. And if you're not tuned in, you'll call it a blessing, when it was a trap the whole time. Discernment will tell you when the words are right, but the spirit behind them is wrong. It'll tell you when someone's touch is warm, but their motive is cold. It'll reveal that not everyone close to you is assigned to you. Some came to observe, some came to drain, and some came to distract. That's why discernment must be developed. You can't afford to move by sight anymore. You've got to sense what's underneath. You've got to ask, what's influencing this person? What's hiding behind this opportunity? What's operating in this atmosphere? Because if you don't ask the right questions, you live with wrong connection. And here's the truth: discernment doesn't always give you explanations. Sometimes it just gives you a warning. And when it does, your job is not to argue. It's to act. Don't wait until damage is done to say, I knew something was off. Trust what you felt the first time. Discernment is the final gate. It keeps what doesn't belong out and keeps your purpose protected. Once sharpened, it becomes your defense, your guide, your guardrail. And when combined with discipline, authority, identity, and clarity, you become unshakable. So now, what will you do with what you've heard? Will you continue to ignore the spiritual patterns around you? Or will you rise, take your position, and break the power that's tried to silence you for far too long? Because everything you've lost is waiting on the other side of your decision.